Good morning and welcome to online worship with the First Parish of Sudbury Unitarian Universalist. There is a button below this window that enables you to receive the order of worship, so please click on it to follow along. This is a very special day because it's one where we embrace our rights as Unitarian Universalists to share in our annual meeting with the privilege to vote our convictions and our conscience. I'm guessing that over the last 380 plus years, we have gathered in person for this meeting, but today we gather online, connected in a way our forebears would probably have thought was pretty magical. I mean, literally magical, and maybe not in a good way. It can feel difficult to imagine the creaking of our pews and the camaraderie that we feel when we are gathered in the meeting house. We miss it, but we gather just the same in love with open hearts and minds, endeavoring to create a space where all are welcome. Bring your whole self, your respective beliefs, identities, gladness, and sorrows. Leave nothing about yourself behind. Welcome, dear ones. We are so happy that you are with us today. This morning's reading was written by Reverend Linda J. Hoddy. Enter with me, that still place within, the center where we find not only our inmost selves, but also our connection to the farthest reaches of the universe. Here we confront our aspirations and our failings. Though we seek always for our lives to be full of goodness, we sometimes lack courage to right the injustices that confront us. Though we seek always to be generous, sometimes our fears cause us to be greedy. Though we seek always to walk the moral high ground, sometimes we judge others too quickly, too harshly. Though we seek always to understand the larger mysteries, sometimes doubt causes us to lose faith in our purpose. Here in this space, made sacred by our shared lives and our shared yearnings, may we find new courage, new generosity of spirit, forgiveness given and received, and rededication to the higher purpose of our lives. You will notice that there's the button underneath this window that encourages you to click on it because it's our order of worship. If you click on that, you can actually follow along. With that in mind, I will light this morning's chalice. Please join along. As we approach our annual agenda, let us remember that we are doing the work of the congregation. When we do the work of this congregation, we touch lives. When we touch lives, we change the world. May this chalice flame we now kindle remind us throughout our worship, our coffee hour, and our annual meeting of our mission and our ministry. Many of you know our first hymn this morning, and it's called If I Had a Hammer. So, feel free. The words are there. Belt them out. We'll get you started. It's a great piece of music. It's a lot of fun. This morning, our reading is from the book by David Kuntz, from his book called Quiet Mind. Starts out with a quick little quote. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. It was a quote from Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas. So the Gospel of Thomas is a manuscript that dates from the time of the four Gospels of the New Testament, but was only discovered in a cave in Egyptian desert in 1945. Called a Gnostic Gospel, contains some sayings of Jesus that the other official Gospels do not, such as the one above. These words speak so earnestly, directly, and succinctly to the needs of our current era. It's tempting to think there was something providential in the timing of their discovery. If what we bring forth from within us will save us, then what we bring forth must be wonderful, marvelous to behold. It must mean that we need to look within to find our truth, not out there somewhere. The power of these words is what I notice first. They are stark and clear. There is no room to fool around or fool yourself. You either get what's in you out, or it will destroy you. What Jesus is talking about in these words is the first and most urgently important gesture in the loop of life. What is within you is expressed to the world. It is literally the way you live your life. And the world receives it, however it might, with applause or disdain, and thus returns it to you. You receive it back, now changed, and process it further, and again express it to the world, forming the limitless loop of life, of communication, really of love. For the process of work, you need the necessary first step: time, quietude, and peace to notice and appreciate what is within. And he gives you a little tip, and he said, this week, notice what is within as the first step in the loop of life. My question for you this morning: is our meeting house just a meeting house? It feels strange to be gathering online for our annual meeting today. I miss our meeting house immeasurably. There's something about the spaces, the parish hall and the sanctuary that speak to me, right directly to my soul, about the energy of place and the commitment of a people. During this time away from that massive building at 327 Concord Road, we have time to think about what the building, rebuilt in 1797, means to us. Is the meeting house just a place to gather, to have meetings, or is it something else? If it were just about gathering for meetings, would we yearn for it so much? I'm guessing that we might, if queried, have different opinions about our level of yearning. Back in the day, in the 16 and 1700s, the meeting house was a place that was first and foremost a church, that when needed for town meetings and such, also served as a meeting house for the gathering of consensus, conducting of local business, and governance of the town, a place to vote one's conscience. That was a time when church and state were very much intertwined, a time when state had a perpetual watchdog that secured the ethics and morality of its dealings, or at least that is what one might have hoped for. Our website shares our history, which informs that the earliest religious services of this Sudbury parish were conducted by the Reverend Edmund Brown, and they took place east of the Sudbury River in 1640, in what is now the town known as Wayland. Because of flooding and inclement weather, those who lived on the western side of the Sudbury River petitioned leaders of the parish for a meeting house of their own. In 1722, Israel Loring accepted a call as the first minister of a newly created precinct with its own meeting house, which was built on our current site. First Parish of Wayland has a similar story about our collective history that shares that in 1640, a group of colonists from Watertown under the leadership of Pastor Edmund Brown settled near the east bank of the Sudbury River. 2 years later, the original First Parish meeting house was built. One room with a dirt floor and a thatched roof. As Sudbury plantation grew, so did First Parish. 3 successive meeting houses were built in 1652, in 1682, and in 1725, serving not only as a church, but also as a community center, storehouse, and stockade. Then I did a little research and found out that the Reverend Edmund Brown is remembered as having entered college on Easter in 1624 and graduated from Emmanuel College, Cambridge University, was the first minister of Sudbury, Massachusetts, who came over on the ship the Confidence with his brothers Thomas and William. He was a freeman in 1640 and ordained in August 1640. The register by Farmer says he came over in 1637. He and his brothers petitioned the General Court to settle the plantation of Sudbury and was granted the authority on September 6, 1638. He was a well-respected member of the community, even though his religious views did not always agree with the church members. Now, I found that a little interesting. Led by Reverend Edmund Brown, those immigrants from Watertown created the Puritan village in Sudbury. Puritanism was never a formally defined religious division within Protestantism, and the term Puritan itself was rarely used after the turn of the 18th century. Some Puritan ideals, including the formal rejection of Roman Catholicism, were incorporated into the doctrines of the Church of England. Others were absorbed into the many Protestant denominations that emerged in the late 17th and 18th centuries in America and Britain. The congregational churches, widely considered to be part of the Reformed tradition, are descended from the Puritans. For a time, they lived in peace. But as with all stories, there is always more. The King Philip's War, was raging all over New England, an armed conflict between 1675 and 1678 between Indian inhabitants of New England and New England colonists and their Indian allies. The war is named for Metacomet, the Wampanoag chief who adopted the name Philip because of the friendly relations between his father, Massasoit, and the Mayflower Pilgrims. The war continued in the most northern reaches of New England until the signing of the Treaty of Casco Bay in April 1678. There is a thought that due to the expansion of the settlers onto the western side of Sudbury, it caused significant duress with regard to the Wampanoag people. Lee Swanson and I have literally discussed this, and he feels that Metacomet found it fought hard to retain Sudbury, especially this western side, because it was considered by his people to be a very important spiritual place. A generation later, after the murder of Metacomet and the treaty was signed, the settlers on the western side of the river, plagued each spring by isolating floods, built a second church in Sudbury. The community separated in 1780. The west side of the river kept the name Sudbury, and the east side was called East Sudbury, later to be called or renamed Wayland. First Parish of Sudbury did well, supported by, as was the commitment, all of the members of the town. The first meeting house was built in 1722 and then rebuilt in 1797 in the same location. It wasn't until the late 19th century that the separation of church and state was considered and spoken about aloud in a public forum, generally traced to January 1st, 1802. A letter penned by Thomas Jefferson addressed to the Danbury Baptist Association in Connecticut and published in a Massachusetts newspaper. Jefferson wrote, "Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions. I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people, which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state, adhering to this expression of the supreme will of the nation in behalf of the rights of conscience. I shall see with sincere satisfaction the progress of those sentiments which tend to restore to man all his natural rights, convinced he has no natural right in opposition to his social duties." Jefferson actually reflects on other thinkers, including the Reverend Roger Williams, who was a Baptist dissenter and founder of Providence, Rhode Island. Stepping back a little bit in history and the background on the Reverend Roger Williams, a proponent of the separation of Church of England and other radical ideals, many of his parishioners did not agree with his idea to separate from the Church of England. He then became minister in Salem, which is kind of funny. There, his ideas also proved too radical. He went to Plymouth, but again, fell into disfavor. Williams insisted that land must be purchased from the Indians rather than taken from them forcefully in order to claim title to it. He again went to Salem, and he was eventually put on trial in 1635 for his views. His sentence was banishment. Williams then purchased land from the Narragansett Indians and established the settlement of Providence, Rhode Island. Williams founded the colony of Rhode Island based upon principles of complete religious toleration, separation of church and state, and political democracy, values the U.S. would later be founded upon. It became a refuge for people persecuted for their religious beliefs. Quakers, Jews, and other religious groups settled in Rhode Island. After forming the first Baptist church in America, Williams left it to seek spirituality in different ways. He stopped preaching to his friends, the Native Americans, when he realized that their form of worship also fell under his principle of religious freedom. Thus, religious tolerance and the separation of church and state was laid upon the table by the Reverend Roger Williams, which Thomas Jefferson wholeheartedly picked up and embraced in his political rhetoric. Let's just turn for a second to one of my favorite amendments, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, which prevents the government from making laws which regulate and establish an establishment of religion, prohibit the free exercise of religion, or abridge the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, the right to peaceable assembly, or the right to petition the government for redress and grievances. It was adopted on December 15th, 1791, as one of the 10 amendments that Constitution of the Bill of Rights. All really important, even today. The First Amendment was put in place as a protection for many freedoms, including the freedom and the choice of religion. It was not created as a protection to keep religion out of the body politic. The Sudbury Meeting House stood throughout these times as the place where the town gathered for worship, engaging in community discourse, and for white male landowners, freemen, a place to vote. With the division of church and state, the first town hall in Sudbury, described as a Greek revival style, was built in 1846 and resided next to the meeting house, carriage sheds, on this property until 1930, when it burned down and was moved across the street. For hundreds of years, the meeting house and local government were one because we needed one another for financial support, for moral and ethical support, for a meeting space, for defense. First Parish was the only religious congregation in Sudbury until 1823, when the Methodists arrived and met in different spaces throughout town, but later built their own church right across the street, which is now the Presbyterian Church, in 1836. When First Parish and the members of Memorial Congregational Church divided over theological differences in 1837, the dissenting members literally walked across the street to meet with the Methodists. It is said that many a town select person was a member of First Parish in the very beginning. All of the leaders of the town were members of First Parish, because if you lived in the town, you literally had to attend the church. The ties that bind. I think about this all the time. The clock in First Parish steeple is one example where the meeting house and the town still gratefully abide as one. The town maintains our clock works, and we maintain the clock face. When we needed a new driveway a few years ago, the town helped to provide for an exchange of a small sliver of land that bordered the cemetery. Town Commons, owned by First Parish, is a shared gathering place that has been rented by the town and maintained for a very long time by them. Thus, I'm brought back to my earlier question. With all of this history, all of our joys, all of our concerns, all of our sorrows, is our meeting house just a meeting house? For me, as your called spiritual leader, I think not. So much has happened in the meeting house and out on the lawn and common. Militia gathered and marched, conquered, vigils, gathering of protests and support, members in debate and resolution. The place where infants, children, teens, young adults and elders are cared for, educated, inspired to be more than, wholly present, and encouraged to be reaching beyond the mundane. In this gathering at First Parish, at the meeting house, that has been done since our forebears settled in Sudbury Plantation in the name of Puritanism, Congregationalism, Unitarianism, and Unitarian Universalism, is it secular or is it spiritual in nature? I would say that we are spiritual in nature, but that's my answer. Your answer lies within you, and my answer, it resides within me. And with this understanding and theological tension, we gather as one. But we are called to bring that from within out. In the Gospel of Thomas, the Gnostic Gospel found in an Egyptian cave in 1945, there was a series of sayings from the sage Jesus, who taught, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Think about that. I'm not sure that sometimes we need to say everything, and sometimes maybe we shouldn't bring things forth, but sometimes we should, and that is the time when we should be called to speak. And so I encourage us to be bold enough to bring forth what is within us, spiritual or not, that we feel truly compelled to speak. I reach back to my sermon from the annual meeting Sunday of 2016, and I shared that our spiritual home, speaking of the meeting house, the place where we take time every week to gather and to do this together, where we wonder and talk and ask questions and tend to our wounds, try to imagine what the right thing to do might look like, place where we endeavor to open our hearts and our minds over and over again, place where we make mistakes, apologize, where we are forgiven, because we know that no one is perfect. a place where all are welcome to bring their whole self, even though it would be so much easier if we all thought alike. Imagine it. But then again, that might be a little too creepy, and no one wants that. As Unitarian Universalists, we revel in the diversity of mind, body, and spirit. Spirit, say spiritual, sacred. Words such as spirit, God, religion, faith have all been co-opted by communities unlike ours, communities that are judgmental and damning, claiming to be the one true religion. And so for UUs, these words are no longer, they just don't seem to be our own anymore because their meanings have been twisted. I put forth that maybe it is time that we untwist the twisted. It is our calling, our commitment to hold space for, to be a place of inclusivity, openness, and evolution, where faith is a dream of a beloved community in which we accept difference and happily live as one. My friends, together we gather online, right where we are. But can you feel the meeting house, our historic home, our tabernacle of our collective soul calling to us? Feel the tug. Send your love and care. So much has changed over the centuries, but we, you and I, are set in this time, as historic yet ever-evolving reality. Never forget that it is our commitment to place and one another that defines our future. Today, we engage in a long-lived tradition of the annual meeting of First Parish of Sudbury. This is a time when it all comes together, the secular, the hopes, faith, and dreams of this community to secure our future, and yet another year of service with one another, endeavoring to realize the beloved community and what that means for each one of us. Open your hearts, open your minds as we engage in this very sacred work of being a community together. I invite you to take a moment in silent reflection, meditation, and prayer. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen. First Parish is financially sustained by annual pledges, fundraisers, donations of time and treasure, and with this, our weekly offering. Please be generous if you are able, and refer to your order of worship for instructions on how to continue to support the good work of First Parish. We thank you for your generosity. Let us join along and do our extinguishing of the chalice. The words are located in your order of worship. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you for gathering with us for online worship this morning. While we are meeting online, we will be offering the opportunity to gather to share milestones and announcements directly afterward, as is our tradition, the postlude. All are invited to the coffee hour, including and especially any visitors who attended our online worship. After the music stops, please click the coffee hour button below the screen next to the order service and offering buttons, and you'll be moved into a Zoom room. I encourage you to click. We look forward to seeing you there. And also that same room is where we're going to hold the annual meeting. So we're going to do it all in that one specific meeting. With that, our closing words. Good and loving people, our time in worship has come to an end. So I bid you to go in peace to the annual meeting, speak your truth in love, give thanks each and every day for the blessings that we behold, the commitment that we embrace to all those who have given so much and who have worked so hard. Live simply and approach life with an open heart and mind. Beyond all else, let your faith in what we can manifest together be your guide. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.